Welcome to Nox Spellenzolder, and this time I want to take a look at Terramara, published by Quined Games. It's played with 2 to 4 players and it takes about 2 hours to play, and it incorporates a worker placement mechanic. And in this game every player takes on the role of a chieftain of their clan, and they try to bring that clan to prosperity by exploring new worlds, beefing up their armies, and visiting as many outposts as they can. And all these different components, they will lead to victory points, and the one with the most victory points at the end will be victorious. So let's have a look at what's inside the box. The game is designed by Virginio Gigli, Flaminia Brasini, Stefano Luperto and Antonio Tinto, and we get the rules in 4 different languages, which is the English, and the rules themselves, they're clear, easy to read through with nice examples and some explanation of certain cards and bonus tiles at the end, and the differences if you set up for less than 4 players, with a reference on the back. We also get the victory points, we get the worker tiles, we get the bonus tiles, the resources we're going to be mining, the components for each player in their own color, we get the character and resource cards, the artifact cards, some of the major player components, the warriors, the round marker, a scoring pad, we get the components to build the main board. Part of these components are like a jigsaw puzzle. They form the outer rim of the play board, and inside we have these territory tiles, and that makes the game different every time we play it. One of these tiles has a misprint on it. There's a sticker added, so you can place the new sticker on top in order to make the game as it was intended. But that's what you get. Let's set up a game. And this is how the game looks when you set it up for 4 players. Every player chooses a color. They get all the pieces in their own color, 4 flags, 4 workers, a clan leader. They get a boat on the cultural track. They get crossed swords on the military track, 2 cards on the outpost track, and 1 additional worker which can be obtained if you go far enough along this track. Every player has their own hut to start with a flag in their own color, and depending on if this is the first time you play it or if you're more experienced with the game, you can either have a similar setup for everybody, so everybody starts with 1 basic resource of every type, 1 level 1 worker, 1 cultural point, and the starting player, which is depicted by this card, will start at space 1 of the military track, the second player on space 2, third player, fourth player, and so forth. Or if you're more experienced with the game, you can use the character cards and the starting resource cards. You get a number of cards equal to the number of players plus 1 of both piles. You give those, in my example, 10 cards to the last player in turn order. That player chooses 1 of the cards, passes the rest along counterclockwise until it gets to the starting player. Then the starting player chooses a second card, and you will always have to have 1 character card and 1 starting resource card, and the cards go clockwise again. So everybody ends up with starting resources depending on the card they've chosen, and a starting character which will give you a sometimes an immediate bonus and sometimes an ability you can always use, and they have a young and mature side, and you always start with the young side. So that's something you can opt for. Then we have the main board, which is composed of a outer ring and a couple of territory tiles. The upper territory tiles, they are used depending on the number of players. And then we have the level 1 tiles, level 2 tiles, and level 3 tiles. You'll just shuffle them and choose 4 tiles of each era, and you place them as such, making sure that these small stone tablets are on the outside, so the landscape flows naturally, and you build up the board, which means it's going to be different every time you play it. And on the different bonus tile spaces, you randomly place these bonus tiles using the correct era symbols. There's 3 eras in the game: the first, second and third era, and these eras are represented by the 1, 2 or 3 rings. You place the bonus tiles on the matching symbols. You place era 1 workers, level 2 and 3 workers, and the era artifacts. We start in era 1, of course. We open up the first 8 artifacts down here, and finally we have the resources, the scoring pad and the victory points, and of course the round marker. But that's how we set up the game. The objective of the game is to be the one with the most victory points at the end of 5 rounds, and the one who manages that will be the winner. So let's start playing the game. Starting with the first player, then going clockwise, each player has to perform one action, and that action means sending out one of your scouts or your clan leader. And you're going to send them out to one of the available actions on the main board. Each action can only contain a maximum of 2 meeples, whether they be regular scouts or clan leaders. If you go to one of these actions, you just perform what is depicted there. So for instance here I'll get 2 raw rocks and I get 1 point on the cultural track, which means my boat will move 1 space forward. There are a couple of rules you'll have to keep in mind. Every space can only contain 2 meeples, as I said before, except the spaces with a guy depicted in the right top corner. You can only send 1 guy there, so if the first one who goes there fills it and no one else can enter it. And if you want to join into a space where there's already a scout, your military strength has to be greater. So if red wants to join me here, its military strength is lower, so red cannot join me. For the other way around, if I wanted to join red, I can, because my military strength is higher than that of the red player. But doing so makes me lose 1 strength. You can use your clan leader to avoid the loss of strength and the restriction, because even if my strength was like way weaker than red, I can still use my clan leader to go there and perform the action. So that's where your clan leader comes in handy. But there are other limitations. For instance, let's have a look at the regular scouts first. You can send your regular scout to any available action space and perform the action depicted there. But you're only going to get your scouts back placed on actions on the current round or higher. So we're at round 1, so these are the current round actions and above. So this one will be locked here until the end of the 4th round. So I have to plan ahead if I'm going to send them further down the road. So that's something that you need to keep in mind. This one will be locked here for at least 4 rounds, so I will not be able to get it back. And the clan leader is restricted. The clan leader may only be used on actions of the current round and above. You can never send it to future actions. You also have your own hut, and you can also send your scouts or clan leader to those actions, and they refine goods, or you can swap a good. But those are the available action fields. Aside from the main action, sending one of your scouts or clan leader to one of the available action fields, you can also create 1 artifact. To see which artifacts are available to you, you'll have to look at your current position on the cultural track. For instance, I'm now here, which means I'm in this segment, which means these 3 artifacts are available to me. If I'm further along the line, I'm in this section, which means those 5 artifacts are available to me. And I can choose to build any of them, paying the costs depicted in the middle. At the end of the game, they will give me victory points, and they have special effects. Sometimes they immediately give you something, sometimes they give you bonuses every time you do a special action, and sometimes a combination of both. Alternatively, if you're on this point of the cultural track or further along, you may also reserve one of the artifacts. You'll just take it, place it close in front of you, And then after you've placed one of your scouts, instead of building one of the artifacts from the available line here, you can also build the one you reserved. You can only have one in reserve in front of you, and then you flip it open. You still have to pay for it. Every time an artifact has been bought from the main line, everything slides to the left and you refill from the current round. But that's what the players are going to do during their turn. Place one of their workers, that's a must, and then they may either build an artifact or reserve one if they're far enough along the cultural track. And then play continues to the next player, placing one of their scouts or clan leader, and so forth and so forth. The actions on the main board, they're self-explanatory. I'm not going to explain each and every one of them, but usually they'll give you either resources, and those resources are all double-sided. You have the raw resources. I have stones and I have bisons, and I can flip them using certain actions to process them into bricks and leather, for instance. You can also process them using your workers. The number depicts how many resources a worker can process, and in order to use them, you'll just rotate them 90 degrees and you flip one of them. Then we have the three tracks. We have the cultural track down here, which is the river. Every time you move one space forward. If you reach certain points, you get certain bonuses. Here you can reserve the artifact cards. Here you can exchange one resource for 2 military strength. Here you get another scout, etc., etc. Then at the left we have the roads with the outposts. To move along the road, you use these car wheel symbols, and for instance, if you get 2 points, you may divide them amongst the 2 cards you have. You move from crossroad to crossroads, which there's quite a lot of them in the starting area, but every crossroad is depicted here or here or here. If you move to one of these bonus tiles, you get the bonus. If you move to one of these spaces, you can place a flag if this tile is flipped. And at the end of each round, these tiles will be flipped. And these provide bonuses at the end of the game. So if I move here, I can opt to place my flag, and at the end of the game, depending on my position on the cultural track, I'll receive a number of victory points. And finally, the right side of each tile, those are the crossroad bonuses, and you get a crossroad bonus when both of your cards are on or past the crossroad. And then you'll get the points, in this case depicted on this tile. And finally, when you reach the end of the road, the first one to achieve that will go to the number 1 position, gaining 8 points. The second one will get 5 points, and the rest will get 3 points for every card they get to the end of the road. So that's the road track, and finally we have the military track on the top side. And as I explained before, the military strength is important for adding your scouts to locations which already contain scouts of other players. But there's a second thing you can do with this military strength, and that's the plunder action. It will cost you 1 military strength, and then you're going to compare your strength to all the players. So people in the same area, so we're both on the square shield part of the track, they will have to give you, if they're lower, 1 resource for every 5 resources they have, and that is rounded down. So for instance, if you have 9 resources, you would only have to give me 1. But players on a lower part of the track, so they're at the round shield, they will have to give me 1 resource for every 4 resources they have. And if my strength increases even further, I'm for instance on this one, every player on the square shield, which is red at the moment, will give me 1 resource for every 4, and both green and blue are on the round shield. They will have to give me 1 resource for every 3 resources they possess. So that's what the plundering action does, and that can really give you a load of resources if you manage it right. And then we have the option to get the starting player card. If you get the starting player card, you will immediately receive a bonus of 1 movement point on the road. The second player in turn order will get nothing. The third player will get 1 point on the cultural track, and the 4th player will get 2 military strength. That's only during round 1 to 4, and in the 5th round you'll just get one of these bonuses and nobody else gets anything. But that's basically how the game is played. You pick one of your scouts or your clan leader, you place it on one of the actions, you perform the action, and then you're allowed to buy or reserve, if you're far enough on the cultural track, one of the artifacts, which will grant you bonuses. And then at the end of the round, you retrieve all the workers you've placed on the current round actions or above. So these will come back to you. But if you've played workers down here, that's not the current round, so they'll stay right there. The 2 tiles of the current round, they are flipped to the other side, revealing the crossroad and the flag action. All workers that have been used are rotated back, so they're available for the next round, and we move the round marker down 1 space. And at the beginning of each round there's a little picture on the right telling you what to do. At the start of the 2nd round we remove the pile of unused level 1 artifacts and replace them by level 2 artifacts. And at the start of the 3rd round, all level 1 artifacts still remaining here in the market are removed and replaced with level 2, and so forth and so forth. And that's how the rounds will be played. And at the end of the 5th round we will tally up the score. You'll get victory points for the chits you've earned. You get victory points for every artifact you've built. You get victory points if you play with the character cards, depending on the kind of bonus your character gives. The most powerful player on the military track gains 8 victory points, the number 2 5 and the number 3 gets 2 points. You get victory points depending on the road track. You get victory points if you have placed flags on certain tiles. You lose 5 victory points if you have a reserved artifact in front of you, so you didn't build it. And you get points for the resources you've remaining. Half a point for raw resources and 1 victory point for each processed resource. And that will make up your final score, and the player with the most points will be the winner of Terramara. And that's how the game is played. Terramara is a great worker placement game, and I like it for several reasons. First of all, when it's your turn you have one action. You place one of your workers and you perform the associated action, which is easy to understand and limited. On the other hand, you have so many options to choose from, which is something that is very interesting, because you want the best available action and you always want to look ahead. When am I going to get my scout back? If I place it at a certain point, can I move on certain other tracks? Will they provide me extra bonuses? And you're always looking for these little combinations which make the sum of 1 and 1 a total of 3. So you get more than you actually do. And I like looking for those combos, making things avalanche along, getting the best available options for your one action. Combine your artifacts with the actions you can perform, the resources you have, and the engine you're building during the game is something I really like about this game. I like the artwork a lot. I like the different wooden components, they are very detailed, but what I like most is the clear use of symbols. The symbols are self-explanatory and that makes the game so much easier to play, and it gives you so much more option to focus on your own strategy. You don't have to flip through the rulebook in order to understand what's going on, which means I can focus on my tactical options and the strategy I have devised in order to get the most points at the end of the game. But the restriction of having only one action versus the many options I have and all the pros and cons those options offer is one of the main attractions this game has for me. I like the mechanic that if I go ahead and take the more powerful actions, I will lose my worker for a couple of turns. This might be interesting because I really want that action, but I do have to weigh it against the fact that I will lose my worker for maybe 2 or 3 rounds, which means I get 2 or 3 actions less at the end of the game, over the entire gameplay. So is it worth that much actions? On the other hand, if you focus on certain tracks, like if you don't bother with the military track, you will probably also be limited in the amount of actions you have, so then placing them further along and having less scouts to place in the future rounds might not be so bad. If your military strength is weak, you cannot go to any spaces where other players are. So those choices make it very interesting how you're going to go about playing this game, how you're going to be obtaining your victory points and progressing your engine. The replay value is also awesome. You start the game with 12 of the 24 terrain tiles, so every time you play the game you'll have different tiles, or whether they be on different positions or entirely new ones. You have a large variety of artifact cards and you'll never see all of them. The same goes for all the bonus tiles. They'll also vary every time you play them, and depending on what other players are going to do, you're going to change your strategy. So there's so many options, and that gives this game such a great replayability. And the player interaction using the plundering action is also interesting, because people tend to hoard in games like this, but hoarding here is a bit of a tricky thing, especially if someone else is gaining a huge amount of military strength. So all in all, Terramara is a great worker placement. I love the way it looks. I like the ease with which it plays, the restriction of having only 1 action each turn, but the wide variety of possibilities to choose from, and all the consequences coming from those different options. They are very interesting to play with, and that's why I recommend Terramara, and I've given it an 8.
Nox Spellenzolder.